Hello and welcome to another episode of the Bible Explained. Today we're going to be covering chapter 19 of Genesis, which is Sodom and Gomorrah. I have been gone for a while, but at the bequest of several people messaging me, requesting me to continue the series, I am back and I will continue the series as requested. We're going to be looking and explaining chapter 19 of Genesis. This is going to be the New International Version, but you can follow along in any version. Just know that if you're using a different version, some of the wording might be different. We're analyzing this one in particular and looking at the words, not just sentences, sentence structure, but everything in each sentence itself. If you did not know that or understand that from the series, this is a very in-depth Bible study of each chapter, each line of scripture, and it's looked at through the eyes of somebody who has their doctorate, master degree, and bachelor in ministry practices. So there you go. I wanted to use my degree for something. That's why I did this series. So if you didn't know that backstory, now you do. I want to talk in particularly about Sodom and Gomorrah because it's a major cultural thing amongst the world, whether you're religious or not. It's very, very huge. It has a massive cultural impact. A lot of people know about sodomy, and they know about the Sodom and Gomorrah story as Sodom and Gomorrah has been destroyed. Sodom and Gomorrah has been correlated and related to many things in the world. One of the more contemporary, modern things that Sodom and Gomorrah has been related to is sin and how sinful places can be, like New York City or Chicago or Las Vegas is a big one that gets thrown out. But I mean, a lot of people relate it to a lot of different things. So even if you have religious experience or no religious experience, you've probably heard the terms Sodom and Gomorrah. And so that's where we're going to be picking up. Beforehand, we had two angels visiting in the previous chapter, and I strongly encourage you to check out the previous chapter before we jump into this one so that you have some context and things like that. And I apologize for the long-winded intro here, but again, it's been a while since I've done one of these, so there you go, all the information. The next few ones won't be so long-winded, and we'll just jump right into it. So anyways, we're going to be talking about Sodom and Gomorrah, and that is the precursor to this chapter right here. The big header would be in the New International Version is that Sodom and Gomorrah is destroyed. We are on chapter 19, Genesis. We're going to start with the first verse. The two angels arrived at Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gateway of the city. And when he saw them, he got up to meet them and bowed down with his face on the ground. So it's important to note two things here. The story itself centers around Lot and how he reacts and treats biblical figures with reverence, holiness. So there you go. He's in the city. We're getting the location established. He's not particularly in the city. He's in the gateway to the city, of the city. So it's interesting that we have these locations, these places, the stage is being set right off in the beginning. Continuing on, verse 2, "My lords," he said, "please turn aside to your servant's house. You can wash your feet and spend the night, and then go your way early in the morning." "No," they answered, "we will spend the night in the square." So why would two angels who are maybe angelic in form, or rather have taken the form of humans for this individual to interact with, for people to see, why wouldn't they want to take shelter? Why wouldn't they want to have their feet cleansed? Why wouldn't they want to spend the night in a nice location? Instead, they want to spend the night in the square, like out in the community square. So something that we need to take a look at and explore. Verse 3, "But he insisted strongly that they go with him and entered his house. He prepared a meal for them, baking bread without yeast, and they ate." That is unleavened bread. It's a very, very old traditional practice of Jewish people now, but it does date back quite a bit and is a very, very long, old standing tradition. Verse 4, "Before they had gone to bed, all of the men from every part of the city, Sodom, both young and old, surrounded the house." Verse 5, "They called to Lot, 'Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us so that we can have sex with them.'" Okay, so there's a lot to unpack here, right? So this is pretty crazy. Imagine you went to a town nearby and you were visiting your friend, right? And your friend's like, hey, we need to get in the house real quick. He's trying to usher you into the house very, very fast. And you're just like, this is weird, man. Why are you trying to get me in the crib real quick? You know what I mean? It's very strange, right? And then, after an hour or two, your house is surrounded by, a couple thousand people. And they're all like, hey, can you bring that guy out so we can just have sex with him? Pretty wild, right? But this is the stage that is being set. This is being established. You are understanding the position that Lot has been put in. You are understanding why ultimately Sodom and Gomorrah will be destroyed. And again, this is a precursor. If you've never read the Bible and you read it from Genesis all the way to Revelation, even not being religious in any way, shape, or form, you likely would have heard of Sodom and Gomorrah being destroyed, and that is the deep moral weight that is weighed against Sodom and Gomorrah for what they have done here. So we're going to learn what actually happened here. So I want you to look at verse 5. They called out to Lot. So they knew it was Lot himself. So the men were not unknowing of who it was, and they knew that men came to the place. And their request was not to understand them. Their request was not to see who they are, what they're doing here. I mean, at any point in time, these guys could have been scouts for a much greater empire that was trying to come and make peace with the king, or was scouting out the location to conquer it. And the first request is to have sex with them. So there you go. Pretty wild, but there it is. In some versions of the Bible, sex is replaced with so that we can know them. And understand that know them isn't the same way that it would be used in contemporary modern form of the English language. Know them means to know their bodies, as in have sex with them, both anal, vaginal, via oral. This is to know the person inside and out. And as insanely disgusting as that may sound, to know two random guys that just showed up at town, this is exactly what is being spelled out here. There is no, we do not need to analyze the wording here. This is literally them wanting them brought out to have sex with them. It was not implicitly stated if they would go somewhere else, which means the implications here is that they're going to have sex with them in the street. Absolutely insane. Verse 6, Lot went outside to meet them and shut the door behind them. Verse 7, and said, no, my friends, don't do this wicked thing. Verse 8, look, I have 2 daughters that have never slept with a man. Let me bring them out to you, and you can do what you like with them. But don't do anything to these men, for they have come under the protection of my roof. And so verse 6 through 8 discuss that Lot knows that these are angels and the importance of said angels, and that it is important that no harm come to them. And there's a very specific reason for that. But the most ironic thing is that these angels are so important, these holy figures are so reverent, that Lot is willing to give up his 2 daughters. Now, I think there are broader implications, because most people would just focus on the idea that Lot is willing to give up his 2 daughters, right? And that in itself is insane. You're willing to give up your own family to save these 2 men that are supposedly angels. However, the implications and the wider implications here is the fact that they've never had sex with a man, which means they're virgins. We don't exactly know their ages, but I'm assuming that they're old enough to be of a breeding age. Now, back in the day, that could have been anywhere from like 8 or 9 to, above the age of 18, right? But in this sense, in what we're looking at, in the context of what we're looking at, it is more than likely that they are old enough to be with a man, marry a man. So between the ages of 9 and 15 or 16, right? So that now, via our modern laws, is pretty disgusting, but back then, right, there would be nothing wrong with that. The thing is, though, a group of men have shown up to have sex with 2 men they've never met before and just showed up to the city, but Lot has 2 women that have never had sex with men, which brings out the broader implications that the men of this city would rather have homosexual relations with men than vaginal sex with women. For if they were willing to surround a house and have sex with visitors, surely they would have already had sex with Lot's daughters, right? So just something to consider. Broader implications, very unique and interesting ideas. Lot emphasizes that they are under the protection of his home. Somehow, Lot thinks that this is going to repel a whole rabble of men, but it fails. Verse 9, "Get out of our way," they replied. "This fellow came here as a foreigner, and now he wants to play the judge. We'll treat you worse than them." And they kept bringing pressure on Lot and moved forward to break down the door. So, the highlighted idea here is that this fellow came as a foreigner, and now he wants to play the judge. I believe they are speaking and talking about Lot himself, as he was not a native of Sodom and Gomorrah, and so they are saying that they are going to do much worse to him than what they're going to do to the angels, which is absolutely insane. It's stunning. They are trying to inflict fear upon Lot himself so that he would give them over much easier. And they're doing this in such a way, such a fashion, so much so that they want to literally break down a door to go and rape two foreign men. Verse 10, "But the men on the inside reached out and pulled Lot back into the house and shut the door. Then they struck the men who were at the door of the house, young and old, with blindness, so that they could not find the door." So clearly the angels know what is going on. The angels permitted Lot to try to deal with the rabble of men first, because they could have done this straight up, right? Like we literally did not need we did not need verses 6 through 10, right? That we could have just got rid of that. The two angels could have said, "Hey, we already know how this is going to go down. We're just going to go ahead and make everybody blind, and we're going to take off." You know what I mean? Because angels have quite unique and amazing powers, and when you're made in God's image and God's light, and you were literally sin-free, you kind of shine bright. So I suppose that's probably how the blindness would have occurred. Point being is that we didn't need verses. What was it? Let's see here. I think 4 through 9 there. We didn't need them. So why was it shown? And that was to emphasize the insanity of Sodom and Gomorrah. We are trying to establish how crazy Sodom and Gomorrah is so that you understand what is going to happen. So, once again, they are struck with blindness. They can't see the door, so they can't open the door. Right? Verse 12, "The two men said to Lot, 'Do you have anyone else in here, son-in-laws, sons or daughters, or anyone else in the city who belongs to you? Get them out of here.'" Verse 13, "Because we are going to destroy this place. The outcry to the Lord against his people is so great that he has sent us to destroy it." Now, you have to understand, there is a lot of sin that has occurred in the world, right? There's tons of sin that is going on in the world right now, so much so that the good Lord would destroy the world, right? But for a few individuals who have a great love for God, they did not destroy the world. God did not destroy the world. But God did send his angels in certain times throughout the Bible to act upon his behalf and cause destruction. And it is not as plentiful as a lot of people would assume. There are many times where cities have been destroyed by God, but you have to understand the context, and the broader context is that we're talking about the entire world. And so those times where cities and locations are flooded or destroyed or things like that are extremely far and few between the beginning of man and the existence to our modern era, right? So these two angels have already made their decision. Even though Lot tried to be a person who would intervene on behalf of the city, it was not enough. They literally said that the sin was so great he was going to destroy the city. And so that pretty much means the deal is sealed. There's nothing that they could have done. Do I believe that Sodom and Gomorrah could have turned from their ways? Maybe right then and there. It's hard to understand, hard to accept the insanity that was going on, but maybe. That's a big maybe, right? nothing's impossible. But yeah, the good Lord gave them many chances, and the last straw would have been a group of men trying to rape two angels, right? Verse 14, so Lot went out and spoke to his son-in-law, who were pledged to marry his daughters, and he said, hurry and get out of this place, because the Lord is about to destroy the city. But his son-in-law thought he was joking. And so, it's such an outrageous claim. You tell someone, hey, you need to get out of here, God's going to destroy this place. They probably would chuckle and laugh at you too. And so, there you go. This is the reaction that was given to him, even though Lot was a pretty godly man. And it's really unfortunate that this occurred, because he wasn't kidding. Verse 15, with the coming dawn, the angels urged Lot, saying, hurry, take your wife and your two daughters who are here, or you will be swept away when the city is punished. So once again, this is the second time that the angels are warning him, and we're getting in the setting stage that this has been happening all night, right? So the rabble are prevented from being able to see all night to get to the two angels, and they are warning Lot that he needs to leave by dawn, otherwise he would be destroyed with the city if he chooses not to leave. Now, I don't believe if he was in an attempt trying to get out of there fully, that God would destroy Lot with the city, but I believe if Lot was still trying to save them, or was siding with the city, he too would have been destroyed. And his family as well, because Lot was the representative family, so Lot's decisions would affect the family itself. And this is very important to understand, because in the next verse, it's going to give you a lot of context for why the angels have warned him twice now. Verse 16, when he hesitated, the men grasped his hand and the hands of his wife and his two daughters, and led them out safely to the city. For the Lord was merciful to them. Verse 17, as soon as they had been brought out, one of them said, flee for your lives. Do not look back. Don't stop anywhere in the plain. Flee to the mountains, or you will be swept away. So, there you go. Extremely important that Lot is being led out. The instructions are very, very clear. Do not look back. Do not stop. Keep going into the mountains, else you will be destroyed too. So there's very clear instructions. You are not misinterpreting the destruction of the city itself. You're being told exactly how and why it's going to be destroyed, and we are going to give you a way out. You have to go to the mountains. So we know the location, what you are supposed to do, what you're not supposed to do. Verse 18, but Lot said to them, no, my lords, please, your servant has found favor in your eyes, and you have shown great kindness to me in sparing my life. But I can't flee to the mountains. This disaster will overtake me, and I'll die. Verse 20, look, here is a town near enough to run to, and it is small. Let me flee to it. It is very small, isn't it? Then my life will be spared. So once again, they're telling him to go to the mountains, but clearly he doesn't fully trust in God, which is unique and interesting. This is extremely unique and interesting, because somehow God has sent you two angels, and they are going to spare your life and your family's life, because you may be the only one who is reasonable enough in the city to not try to gang rape angels as soon as they arrive, right? And you then bargain with them, please don't send me out to this wilderness, these mountainous areas. Instead, send me to this very, very small town. And so we're going to continue to verse 21. He said to him, very well, I will grant this request too. I will not overthrow the town you speak of. Verse 22, but flee there quickly, because I cannot do anything until you reach it. That is the town called Zor. Doesn't particularly matter the town name, but it might in the context of verification and if it's referenced later on. The point is, the angels are extremely merciful, and God is extremely merciful, because they do grant the request. But they do note that the reason they can't destroy the city is because of Lot. So something to be noted. A lot of connotations with that. Verse 23, by the time Lot had reached Zoar, the sun had risen over the land. Verse 24, and then the Lord rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens. Verse 25, thus he overthrew those cities and the entire plain, destroying all of those living in the cities and the vegetation of the land. Verse 26, but Lot's wife looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. So, one of the most common things that have been known for Christianity and religion, both religious people and non-religious people, is that when Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed, it was destroyed through sulfur, right? Burning sulfur. So that's very unique and interesting too, because we, in our modern era, we have the tools to understand and know that meteorites, when they come down, they aren't made of sulfur, right? Like they're not. They're made of all sorts of materials. I'm gonna look it up right now, just for the fact that I know it's not sulfur, but it may be a mixture of different things. And most meteorites made of iron, stony iron, a combination of unique and interesting materials, but sulfur is not mentioned. And I'll just look up meteor materials as well. And again, iron, nickel, rock, siliconites, carbon, and things like that. So not particularly sulfur, right? So could have been a meteorite made of sulfur, maybe, perhaps, interesting. However, I would like to note that in many references in the Bible does speak of sulfur being in hell. I'm going to look up a Bible verse referencing sulfur in hell. And we have Revelation 20:10. The devil who had deceived them was thrown into the lake of fire and sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet were, and they were tormented day and night. So that's the lake of fire, sulfur, right there. And it does correlate, and it's just very strange to me that sulfur, the wording sulfur, is used here, because if you have burning materials, if you have burning stone, if you have burning metal, it is not going to smell like sulfur. Sulfur is a very, very distinct smell. I personally live in a location where up north there is a sulfur mine, and the sulfur mine is so potent and powerful that you can smell it throughout the whole town, and it's a very, very, very large city, talking 50 to 75,000 people, right? And you can smell the sulfur. So it's not a smell that you would mistake. So I doubt that it was mistakenly put here, right? Just due to the simple fact that this is being recorded, and it's being recorded in such a way that it either is all true or it's all false. So there's no in between. We're not lying. I fully understand the context and connotations of we put in the wrong word, right? But we need to look at this, and we need to understand that it is sulfur that rained down, and the other location that is referenced in the Bible is hell. So the Lord took heat and fire from hell and rained it straight onto Sodom and Gomorrah, and he didn't just destroy the city itself, he destroyed the plains and the vegetation of the land so that it could not be rebuilt, that the sin was so great. He literally turned it into a hellscape. And because the disobedience of Lot's wife, because Lot's wife looked back, she then became a pillar of salt. Now again, I don't think after the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah that people couldn't look in that direction. I just think that people had the intent to see what was occurring, what was going on with Sodom and Gomorrah. They would have been destroyed as she had become a pillar of salt. Why a pillar of salt? I don't know, the connotations of salt and the correlations in the Bible usually go with salt being the salt of the earth, something purifying, something, you know, not sin, not corrupted. So we could make that connection too. We could draw that connection. I'm not particularly sure why they chose salt instead of sulfur or ash or just inflame or just straight destroyed or turn to a pile of bones. You can make those connections yourself. Perhaps the Lord was purifying her. I don't know. I don't know. There's not a lot to explain why the salt was chosen here. Maybe there's a cross reference in the Bible somewhere, but I don't know about it. Verse 25, by the time they had reached Zor, the sun had raised over the land. So we were talking earlier how it was almost daybreak, and now the sun had raised over the land. Could it have been dawn? Yeah. Could it have been the afternoon? Yeah. The point is that it was not night anymore. So it took them quite some time to get to Zor. Quite a bit of walking, maybe 8 to 10 hours, possibly longer. So there you go. Early next morning, Abraham got up and returned to the place where he had stood before the Lord. He looked down towards Sodom and Gomorrah. So there you go. That's very, very important. Verse 28. Now the angels had told him not to look back to escape. So once he had escaped into the town, he waited until Sodom and Gomorrah's destruction, where his wife had not listened to him, and his wife had looked back, likely with the intent to see what was going on and return to Sodom and Gomorrah. And unfortunately, she was turned to a pillar of salt, but he was not turned to a pillar of salt because Sodom and Gomorrah had been destroyed. So again, it nullifies the arguments of, well, what if there's a passerby and he just looks over and he sees a meteor shower? Would he too have been turned to a pillar of salt? I'm going to err on the likelihood of that being not, just due to the simple fact that he wouldn't have known what was going on. So in his heart, he wouldn't have had corruption in mind. But if he was a corrupt citizen of Sodom and Gomorrah, absolutely. He looked down at Sodom and Gomorrah and towards all of the land and the plain and saw dense smoke rising from the land. Smoke like smoke from a furnace. So it's very important to understand that it was smoking so much, it looked as if it was melting something from a furnace, which is wild. That's a lot of smoke. Verse 29. And so when God destroyed the cities of the plain, he remembered Abraham, and he brought Lot out of the catastrophe that overthrew the cities where Lot had lived. And there you go. The catastrophe being the grave amount of sin. And I know a lot of people, a lot of Christians like to reference homosexuality in this, saying, oh, remember Sodom and Gomorrah, remember Sodom and Gomorrah. And I'm absolutely not defending homosexuality here or transsexuals or anything of that nature, but I'm just presenting the implications of Sodom and Gomorrah and how that cross over to homosexuality and why Christians and Catholics and many people in religious orders and faiths reference this, and that is the reason because they will reference Sodom and Gomorrah and say this is obviously direct correlation to anti-homosexual propaganda, right? And so that's worth knowing, and that is something that needs to be stated and understood. The most important verse here is verse 29, where God had destroyed the cities, but he did remember Abraham, and he brought Lot out. So it's incredibly important to understand that the good Lord does remember and keep his promises, and he did protect Lot. Lot and his daughters, verse 30, Lot and his 2 daughters left Zor and settled in the mountains, for he was afraid to stay in Zor. He and his 2 daughters lived in a cave. So there you go. Obviously Lot understanding why he was originally supposed to be sent to the mountains, but he decided to go to Zor instead. And so it's very, very important for Lot to escape any places that would cause him danger. And the 2 angels were correct. They were likely trying to get him out of harm's way, but they permitted him to go to the town while they destroyed that place, and likely knew that he wouldn't stay in that town. And so he ended up going to live in a cave which is pretty wild if you really think about it, but there you go. Verse 31, one day the older daughter said to the younger, our father is old, and there is no man around here to give us children, as is the custom all over earth. Which is a unique thing to say, very interesting. It's like, well, there's no guys around here for us to get pregnant by, and it is the custom to have a child. And I guess at this point in time, is their only existence to have a child? Maybe, perhaps, I'm not particularly sure the reference there, as is the custom all over earth. But older to younger, again, age is not referenced here. Verse 32, let's get our father to drink wine and sleep with him to preserve our family line through our father. And now we're talking about incestuous propositions and ideas, which is, again, something that the good Lord does say not to do pretty early on in biblical practice. You're not supposed to do that for many, many reasons. Verse 33, that night they got their father to drink wine, and the older went and slept with him. He was not aware of it when she lay down or when she got up. That means the father had to have been so trashed that he was blackout drunk. Because once again, the reference here, and this is a very important reference, is that up when the first two men had reached Sodom and Gomorrah, Lot said, verse 8, look, I have two daughters who've never slept with a man. And now, only a day or two later, maybe a week or a month, we don't know the time period, but it was later after Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed. Now they want to get pregnant by a man and have a child themselves, which is interesting and unique that they didn't just ask their father if they could have gone down to a town and find a husband. The son-in-law did not join them because he thought they were joking. And so now we have this situation. Verse 34, the next day, the older daughter said to the younger, last night I slept with father. Let's get him drunk on wine again tonight, and you go sleep with him so that he can preserve our family line through our father. Verse 35, and so they got their father to drink wine at night also, and the younger went and slept with him. Again, he was not aware that she had laid down or when she had got up. Again, 2 nights in a row, blackout drunk off wine, slept with his daughters through their own hand and not his hand, which is very, very unfortunate. That is a sin of unknowing, but through the 2 daughters, they absolutely knew what they were doing. Verse 36, so both of Lot's daughters became pregnant by their father. Verse 37, the older daughter had a son named Moab. He is the father of the Moabites of today, which in modern context, good luck trying to trace that lineage properly. And then verse 38, the younger daughter had a son, and she named him Ben-Ami, which is the father of the Ammonites of today. And again, you can try to trace that lineage if you want. That's not the point of these verses in these scriptures, but that will come into play later on. So there you go. That's the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. Lots of sin, lots of sin, lots of sin. And unfortunately, the sin continues to perpetrate itself no matter what occurs. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you guys enjoyed this exploration of verse 19. Quite a long-winded one, but very important to analyze every scripture here. If you did, go ahead and leave me a comment. Make sure to like, share this, subscribe, and tell others about your religious experiences. Please return here probably next week, and we will be exploring chapter 20. As always, God bless, and thanks for tuning in.